It doesn't mean that I want, these nations to merge. I don't even want, France and Germany to merge into one nation. I certainly don't want the Japanese and Europeans to intermarry to the point that the Japanese disappear, because that's what happened in that case, because there are fewer of them. I want them to remain Japanese. And so we can't approve of those sorts of admixtures, but at the same time, we can recognize they aren't incompatible in the same way. And
before we get into it, what you're about to watch is the censored version of this episode. Increasingly, the algorithm is becoming more and more hostile to the type of content I want to deliver. This is a fully independent channel which is contending with the real world issues. If you'd like to support me and keep these talks alive, please head over to the Substack, where here and only here you'll find the full uncensored video, along with live Q&As, a chance to speak to some of the biggest voices in this space, and building a community of like-minded people. I'll leave a link in the description. Please be sure to check it out. Anyways, enough from me. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. I think you already kind of answered this at the start, but then with those people who kind of fall between two tribes, they themselves are mixed raced. How do you mitigate that? How do you, is it just brutal? Like, all right, you're not with us, or,
I think we have to draw up effectively Nuremberg Laws 2.0. So, right. And the funny thing is the Nuremberg Laws, for anyone who's never read them, go read them or just look at a diagram. They were extremely lenient, like wildly lenient. They are not at all what people would expect from the propaganda about Nazi Germany, right, about the Third Reich. So, but I think you have to draw up some basic rules for that. And then obviously have carve-outs and exceptions. This is not something where I think you can necessarily be 100% black and white. Every single case is just this mathematical formula. You have to do it, right? Mm. And there are admixtures that are more compatible and those that are not. Like I said, generally speaking, sub-Saharan African, they need to go back. They need to be deported back to whatever African country, whether it's Liberia in the U.S. case, because we literally set up, most people forget this, we literally set up a country in Africa, Liberia, gave them our constitution, gave them initial funding, and the plan was to send the freed slaves back there. That never panned out. It didn't happen, but some of them went because they got a bunch of money and a boat ride. No plane ticket at the time, but a boat ride. And Liberia is not in great shape, we'll say. So Vice actually, of all things, managed to do a good documentary on it. Worth your time. Some people probably might not want to watch it. You might want a strong stomach for some parts of that. But I think that we have to send that sort of admixture back because it's too destructive to have it here. But the exception that I'll give sometimes, just because it's sort of the low-hanging fruit, the easy one, if someone is half European, half white, and half Japanese, they can pretty easily pick one or the, not easily, obviously, it's a challenge for the person, but they can pick one or the other and be pretty much fine in either society. Right. And then over the course of 3-4 generations, their children will have some very tiny admixture, but it's basically disappeared because that's just how genetics works, right? It halves every generation if you're marrying into one population. So for things like that, I think we can give more leeway. So obviously the real issue would be the, partial Jewish blood, because it seems like it doesn't take very much of it for them to be subversive. I can think of some individuals who, ran a DNA test, found out they're like 2% Jewish, and like, I love Israel more than everything else now. And it's like, what percentage does it take to trigger this? And apparently it's very small. So, but they already have a country over there. They can easily be sent there as long as they stop causing us problems.
Yeah. It's such a hard one with the Jewish community. How do you mitigate that? Because they just have such a long history of subversion. So that can't be ignored, right?
Well, I think you just have to, put them over in it. Like the best case for them is put them all in Israel and just quarantine it and not allow them in or out. Just right. You stay here and annoy each other and stop annoying everyone else on the planet. They probably won't accept it, and so it escalates from there. But again, it's, right. We would prefer peaceful solutions, but by and large, our enemies will not let us have that. They're demonically animated in most cases, so they won't. Satan is not going to say, "Oh, well, you were nice, so I'll play nice too." That's not how he operates.
Yeah, and Japan is always the go-to, isn't it? I mean, very,
it's
very
just-
peaceful people.
Well, that's exactly it. They're peaceful, they're orderly, they're not loud on public transport. All of these nice things that Europeans, particularly Western Europeans, actually like. They're not hooting and hollering in the restaurant. They don't litter in the national parks. The only tourists I run into, I like to do a lot of hiking in the national parks. The only tourists I run into when I'm out in the middle of nowhere are basically Germans and Japanese, sometimes French, a handful of British. I think I ran into the Scottish once, like Western Europeans and no one else. And they're never causing any trouble. So I have no problem dealing with anyone from those groups because they don't cause trouble. It doesn't mean that I want, these nations to merge. I don't even want, France and Germany to merge into one nation. I certainly don't want the Japanese and Europeans to intermarry to the point that the Japanese disappear, because that's what would happen in that case, because there are fewer of them. I want them to remain Japanese. And so we can't approve of those sorts of admixtures, but at the same time, we can recognize they aren't incompatible in the same way and to the same extent.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Is there any questions you might have for myself? I mean, I don't know how much I can offer, but I guess I got a quite unique perspective on when it comes to the UK with this.
So I know a little bit about the UK and what's happening over there. I've met some guys from some of the nationalist groups in the UK. I'm not going to name anyone, obviously, because that gets them the extra special house search. So I won't say anything about their names. But other than that, anything you can tell me about what's currently going on over there in terms of, not concrete, don't give away any details that are, shouldn't be made public, but I don't know that much about what's going on the ground, as it were, over there, because I just don't have as many connections with that.
Yeah, and in a sense, I'm not like fully embedded in the national scene in a way, but I mean, there's funny things going, like politically, in order to really get the country on the right track, the biggest obstacle, you have to win the politics. There's a lot of people who are black-pilled and saying like, oh, we'll just move to the countryside, we'll do this and that. It's so incredibly expensive in the UK. You can't do that. You couldn't really set up this return to the land like Eric Orwell did.
Right.
Because everything, even if you were, the more north you go, the cheaper it gets. Like I'm from the south, so I'd basically have to relocate to the other side of the country. It's freezing cold. The conditions aren't good.
Yeah.
So it's not that easy. And even if that was the case, and you have all of these like little enclaves in the woods or whatever, the government can easily just take over those. They have absolute power.
Yeah.
So
that's the problem. These groups that are separate, and we have this in the U.S., as you are well aware, the separatist groups that want to move to some particular place and set up a little compound, or you get the people who argue for balkanization or whatever it happens to be. None of those arguments or those paths forward is ultimately viable, because as long as you have that central hostile authority that wields all the power, it can come in at any time and crush you. Right. And that's not an acceptable outcome. So I know that there are people who have tried to do things like that in the U.S. Well, they'll go set up some little town somewhere, and then the government comes in and destroys them, or in some cases they're libertarian, they destroy themselves. But it's not workable. You have to win the political, regardless of if you're talking about the political in the sense most people mean, or political in the Clausewitz sense, right? Whichever one, you have to win that fight. And I know that in the UK, you definitely have some trouble doing that because of the structure of the system. The parties actually wield authority over there. People think of the Republicans and the Democrats as having authority, but party discipline in the US is kind of loose when it comes down to the state and the local level. The only thing they can really do is say, they don't endorse you and they won't give you money. But if you can mount your own campaign, they can't really stop you. They can, there's lawfare and stuff like that, but it's not the same in the UK where you have lists and things like that, where they can basically just make it so you can't get elected. So, but at the same time, you do have the option to run other parties in your system. You basically can't create a third party in the US.
Yeah. I mean, people complain about the electoral college, right? The system, which is in the UK, is like so much worse. And, we've been plagued basically by the uni party. We have yours is liberal conservative, ours is Labour and conservative, right? Labour Tories. And it's a uni party. They've basically both got the same policies. It's not a choice. Whoever you vote in, they're just going to push the agenda further. So right now there's this kind of that I would say the main obstacle is destroying the uni party. And we have this one group called Reform. Reform is almost definitely a shill. Like, there's just no question about it. Reform is a shill, but that might destroy the uni party, and it has probably the best chance, right?
It can still be useful, even if it obviously has some subversive elements. The alternative for Deutschland, right, is kind of the same. Mm-hmm. It's also clearly a little subversive, has some corruption. There's some questions about leadership and things, but it might still have utility in terms of damaging that uniparty in order, basically, it's a wedge to get into the system.
And then you heard of Restore Britain?
Yes.
This is more, I'd say, like the people's choice. To those who are aware, but it's going to be the younger generation as well, because they have a big presence on social media. They're doing a really good job. They've got loads of influencers on their side. But the older generation, they're not going to know who these people are because it's a relatively new party, Rupert Lowe.
Yeah.
This is the people's choice, and even that is questionable of where the loyalties lie. There's potential, could be a shill, who knows. But now we're running the risk that you have Reform and Restore. They're pretty much going to be fighting each other. Maybe it splits the vote. This is the worry, right? It splits the vote, and now the uni party survives, and there's no progress.
In the US, one of the best ways to go about achieving something similar is you could actually run not as a real third party, but sort of as a regional party where you sort of caucus with a major party at the national level, but you have your own sort of control in a particular region of the US. It would have to be within a state to start out. That is a viable way forward politically for those of us over in the US. It's kind of similar to how you have the difference between the CSU and the CDU over in Germany, the North versus South split, and they caucus at the national level sort of thing. Right. It's a little similar to that. But because of that lack of party discipline, where the party doesn't have the ability to really enact real control at the lower level, we do have some options here that aren't as open for you guys over there.
Yeah. I kind of see, and I know this just isn't going to be viable for everyone. And, most people live where they live because of their work and, whatever it is, their family. So it's not like you can just easily up and move to one state, even though logically that would be like maybe the best option. You have consolidated power.
Yes.
But practically speaking, that's just not possible. So don't know. Do you think something like that could happen?
There's a little bit of it happening just sort of naturally. I'm in Tennessee right now, and I'm originally from California. A lot of those who are moving to Tennessee are right-leaning. Tennessee is already a pretty right-wing state. We basically just got rid of our last Democrat by redrawing district lines. But those who are moving here have seen what has happened to other parts of the country, particularly the Californians who are moving here, despite what some people in Tennessee think about Californians. But that does open up some opportunities because you can explain to people, there's a reason you moved here from another part of the country. What is happening there is going to happen here unless we do something about it. So there's already a natural sort of pool of people that could be turned into a political force, and more of those men are moving here every day. There's some intentional communities being set up. So that's part of it. If you can get enough people in a county, then you can take over the county offices and things like that. And that gives you a base of operations, which people discount a lot of times how important it is for a county office, which is relatively minor, to be friendly. Because they're the ones that get to approve things like zoning and building and, use of land and all sorts of different things are in the hands of those sort of petty officials. If they're on your side, they can help you a lot. And you can get the sheriff even, because a lot of times here in the US, the sheriff is an elected position. And so you can have control of county law enforcement.
So if you've made it this far, first of all, thanks very much. If you're watching on YouTube, please remember to comment, share, and subscribe. And if you're watching on Spotify, please be sure to give it a 5-star review. The full uncensored version of this episode can be found on Substack and Substack alone. Both YouTube and Spotify require censorship. However, Substack doesn't. With one YouTube already taken away, it's only a matter of time before it happens again. On top of that, with the Substack, we'll be doing live Q&As, talks with some of the biggest voices in this space, and a chance for you to ask the questions you want answering. Head over to Substack now for only £5 a month. I'll leave a link for this in the bio below. Cancel anytime. Thanks for watching this week's episode, and I hope to see you next time. All the best.